Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to another edition of Crimes of the Week International. Representatives from China's Hong Kong police force say that a young man is facing multiple charges this week after he had a full-blown freakout on the campus of a local university, one that left at least 5 people injured, including officers. The whole thing began shortly before 10:30 a.m. on March 31st inside of a dining hall at Hong Kong's City University. Students and faculty members from across the campus were trying to enjoy their meals. However, that was apparently difficult because of one person. The suspect, identified only as a 23-year-old student at the school by the last name of Wang, was watching videos on his phone with the volume turned up incredibly loud. This had bothered a number of people to the point that they'd made complaints, but finally a woman who was eating there decided to take a more direct approach. The 39-year-old walked over to Wang and politely asked him to turn his phone down. Sounds pretty reasonable, right? Well, apparently Wang didn't think so, because his response was to immediately have a violent meltdown. Not only did the 23-year-old allegedly punch the 39-year-old woman in the face, he attacked her with a chair. A dining hall employee who attempted to intervene received similar treatment, ending up with a bloody nose before Wang stole a backpack containing credit cards and the equivalent of about $130 US in cash. By the time police responded, the 23-year-old had fled into a nearby school library, where the ridiculous situation continued. At least 3 more people were attacked during this time, including 2 police officers, at least one of whom was thrown to the ground. It seems police had a hell of a time detaining Wang, even after many officers arrived at the scene. The chaotic situation was partially captured in photos and videos taken by bystanders, showing police struggling to subdue the 23-year-old. He was finally arrested and marched out of the library with a torn shirt, though not before pepper spray was apparently deployed multiple times. According to police, Wang is now facing a number of charges, including criminal damage, assault occasioning actual bodily harm, theft, assaulting a police officer, and obstructing a police officer in the execution of duties. Authorities in the Indian state of Uttar Pradesh say that they are investigating a truly devastating case this week, after a father allegedly murdered all 4 of his young children before taking his own life as well. The chilling crime was uncovered sometime early on March 27th, when a man in the city of Shahjahanpur named Prithviraj was in the middle of his usual routine. Like most mornings, he planned to start the day with some tea, so he decided to go next door to his son Rajiv's house to see if his grandson wanted to join him. However, when Prithviraj arrived, he found the home quiet. After repeatedly calling out and receiving no answer, he decided to find another way in, climbing through an entrance on the roof. Moments later, neighbors ran over to see what was going on when they heard Prithviraj screaming out in anguish and horror. Upon heading inside of the residence, he had found his son Rajiv dead, along with all 4 of his grandchildren. When police arrived at the scene, the awful truth was soon revealed. It became clear that Rajiv had cut the throats of his son and 3 daughters before hanging himself in another room with one of his wife's saris. The wife, Kanti Devi, was the sole survivor, and only because it turned out she had left the house the night before. She later told police she had done so because she could no longer put up with Rajiv's abuse, as well as his extremely unsettling behavior. According to family members who were interviewed by police, Rajiv used to be a perfectly normal and loving father. That was until about a year ago when he had suffered a serious head injury during an accident. Since then, he had reportedly been unable to work and had started exhibiting signs of serious mental illness. Kanti told police that on several occasions, Rajiv had made comments suggesting that they were both going to die, so that they needed to kill their children first so that they wouldn't be left alone. Apparently, Rajiv was receiving ongoing treatment at the time of this week's incident, though his behavior had continued to be erratic. Authorities revealed that at the crime scene they found evidence that Rajiv had spent time sharpening the murder weapon with a piece of sandpaper before committing the killings. The victims reportedly range in age from 5 to 13 years old. At the time of this recording, the extremely dark situation is still being investigated by police to determine exactly what transpired in the lead up to the crime. The family and friends of a popular Mexican children's entertainer are demanding justice as well as a proper investigation this week, after they say he was brutally murdered by an angry mob who had accused him of a heinous crime. The whole thing began sometime on March 24th, when the man in question, Cayetano San Juan, was attending an event in the municipality of Tuxtepec. The 50-year-old clown, who was better known by his stage name El Payaso Soldadín, or the Clown Soldier, was a well-known entertainer in the area and was a popular performer at local children's parties and other gatherings. However, on that particular day, things took a dark turn. It happened after Cayetano was accused of groping an underage girl who was also attending the event. Cayetano's family members, friends, and other supporters have since disputed this, saying that while he was intoxicated, he never touched anyone or did anything inappropriate. Instead, they say he was simply offering the girl some food. Unfortunately, we'll never know what really happened, because instead of reporting the situation to police or even trying to verify what had occurred, a group of people who were there decided to act as judge, jury, and executioner. After surrounding the 50-year-old, they tied him up and began mercilessly beating him in the middle of the street. Once he had been hit, kicked, and punched into unconsciousness, some members of the angry mob doused him in alcohol and set him on fire. While all of this shocked Cayetano's loved ones, what has especially outraged them is what happened next. According to reports, even after police were called, they refused to do anything for hours as Cayetano lay dying in the middle of the road. When one officer did come by and try to help, his calls for medical assistance were denied by local authorities on the grounds that they didn't have authorization from a family member. Not long after, this same officer was apparently threatened into leaving by the same angry mob responsible for the attack. It was only after several hours, when Cayetano's family members heard about what had happened, that his sister came and was able to transport him to a local hospital. By that time, it was too late though, and he died in agony about 10 hours later. Now, before you go assuming that the mob that killed Cayetano was at least justified in their anger, it's worth pointing out that it's not at all clear that this is the case. Since news of the story broke, several other members of the so-called clown community have come forward sharing their own disturbing stories. One of those was a fellow clown named Nito Payasito, who said that he and his partner had recently experienced something that easily could have turned just as ugly. While they were at an event, they were falsely accused of kidnapping a child and were detained by a mob of vigilantes for several hours. They only got away after friends were able to intervene and help them escape. Cayetano's family members and friends are now demanding action from authorities and calling for a full investigation to be done. At the time of this recording, though, it remains to be seen where things will go from here. The loved ones of a Brazilian teenager have been left absolutely devastated this week after she was the victim of a brutal kidnapping, assault, and murder at the hands of a trusted family friend. According to reports, the whole thing began sometime on the morning of March 25th, when the victim, 13-year-old Ingrid Vitoria, was on her way home in Pernambuco's Santa Maria de Boa Vista district. She was with her mother and her 4-year-old brother, and initially, it seems they were walking. However, at some point, family friend and neighbor, 36-year-old Joquelmo Caldas de Silva, offered them a ride. The three immediately accepted the offer, not thinking anything of this. After all, Joquelmo had been friends with Ingrid's father since childhood, and the two of them had also worked together for many years. However, things took a horrifying turn when somewhere along the way, Joquelmo abruptly stopped the vehicle. After tying up Ingrid's mother and brother, he left them at the side of the road before throwing Ingrid in the trunk and driving off. When police were alerted to the kidnapping, a search was immediately launched, but unfortunately, Joquelmo had quite a head start. He disappeared into the woods with the teenage victim near the town of Caraíbas, and investigators were unable to locate either of them. The desperate situation continued for 4 days, until on March 29th, things came to a tragic end. That's when Ingrid's body was found in a densely forested area a few miles from where she had disappeared. She had been sexually assaulted and beaten to death with a rock. That same day, Joquelmo was found by police just over half a mile away from Ingrid's body. When officers attempted to place him under arrest, he pulled out a gun, leading to a shootout in which he was killed. Understandably, the whole incident has left all of Ingrid's loved ones heartbroken and extremely shaken, but particularly her father. In a media interview, he seemed at a total loss for words, stating in part, quote, "My own friend, what did he do to me? Today I am mourning my daughter, sad, suffering. It was something we didn't expect. We had total trust in him, and he did this to us. I'm devastated. I'm devastated. I don't understand what happened. I don't understand why he did that. I don't understand." At the time of this recording, police say no official motive behind the awful crime has been determined, but that they are still investigating. They are also trying to determine if anyone else was involved in the crime. Well, folks, another Easter is right around the corner, and as we all know, that can only mean one thing. Hide your Cadbury cream eggs, because people are apparently out here trying to steal them. Don't believe me? Just ask representatives from England's Cambridgeshire Police, who put out an equally strange and amusing bit of body cam footage this week showing the arrest of a man absolutely loaded down with the iconic chocolate eggs. The whole thing started shortly after 11:30 a.m. on March 22nd, when the suspect, later identified as 26-year-old Dean DeGroot, walked into a Tesco Express convenience store in the city of Peterborough. From the sounds of it, DeGroot didn't even try to pretend he was a customer. Instead, he just began grabbing box after box of Cadbury cream eggs from the store's shelves and shoving them into a duffel bag. After allegedly stealing more than 220 pounds, or about $280 worth of the eggs, he then took off without paying. A member of staff attempted to chase DeGroot, but ended up getting lucky when they were able to flag down a passing police car. The officers followed the 26-year-old, who they were able to catch a short distance away. Though he had apparently abandoned his duffel bag by this time, he wasn't exactly inconspicuous. You see, he still had a ton of the stolen cream eggs stuffed into his jacket, leading to this bizarre exchange.
It's all gonna fall out. Is it? Oh, we can loaded this out.
DeGroot quickly admitted to what he had done after his arrest, and this week was sentenced to 12 weeks in prison. Though that sentence was suspended for a year, the 26-year-old was also banned by the judge in the case from entering the entire county of Cambridgeshire for the next 3 months. Not sure how they're planning to enforce that, but all the same, it seems the county's cream eggs are a little bit safer, at least for now. Authorities in the Argentine province of Buenos Aires say that 2 suspects are in custody this week, and they are currently searching for a third, following a violent armed robbery and carjacking that culminated in a deadly police chase. The whole thing began at around 5 p.m. on March 28th, when a woman was returning to her home in the town of Ricardo Rojas. As she arrived at her residence, suddenly she was ambushed by 3 men who were carrying weapons and had been traveling in a Volkswagen Golf. The suspects forced the victim inside her own home at gunpoint, after which they began stealing her valuables and belongings. 2 of them then hopped behind the wheel of her Jeep Renegade and drove off, while the remaining suspect fled in the Volkswagen. Police quickly caught up with the men in the stolen Jeep. However, they refused to stop, leading to a chase that lasted several miles. During that time, the suspects drove recklessly and gunshots were fired, injuring several people. However, sadly, the carnage wouldn't stop there. Shortly after driving into the neighboring town of Pablo, Nogués, the driver of the Jeep hit another car on the road and lost control of the vehicle. The Jeep slammed into a tree and ended up flipping over, though not before running over and crushing an innocent mother and her baby girl who were simply trying to cross the road. The mother and daughter have since been identified as 41-year-old Natalia Heitzenretter and 11-month-old Sophia. Natalia was rushed to a hospital after the crash, though sadly, there was nothing that could be done for baby Sophia. She was pronounced dead shortly after emergency responders arrived at the scene. Police, meanwhile, were able to apprehend one of the suspects, 35-year-old Rodrigo Lucas Moreira, at the scene. The second man in the Jeep, 25-year-old Christian Baraza, was identified by his neighbors and arrested the following day. However, the third suspect currently remains on the run. According to Natalia's heartbroken husband Gabriel, who was also Sophia's father, Natalia remains in critical condition in the hospital. She suffered numerous broken bones as well as severe trauma to her chest and head as a result of the crash, and is currently in a medically induced coma. Gabriel says that she still has no idea about the death of their baby daughter, who was supposed to celebrate her first birthday at the beginning of May. As if this isn't heartbreaking enough, this is not the first time Natalia has had to endure a tragedy like this. In April of 2015, her 16-year-old son Franco was brutally murdered when he tried to stand up for a female friend who was being beaten by her 21-year-old boyfriend. Though Franco successfully intervened and saved the girl, it cost him his life. The unhinged boyfriend grabbed a knife and stabbed him in the chest, causing him to die from massive blood loss. In a dark coincidence, the hospital where Natalia now lies unconscious is the same one where her son was also pronounced dead. It's not clear what will happen from here, something that was hammered home in a devastating statement from Gabriel, who told reporters, quote, "No one will bring my loved ones back. Who doesn't live in fear with the way that things are? The fear is always there. They can kill you for nothing." At the time of this recording, police say that they are currently searching for the final remaining suspects in the case. In the meantime, Morera and Barraza remain in custody, and charges are now being pursued against them. Officials in the Netherlands say that they are investigating the aftermath of a terrifying incident this week, following a knife attack that left 5 people wounded in the heart of the country's most well-known tourist city. The whole thing unfolded on the afternoon of March 27th near Amsterdam's famous Dam Square. Like usual, the area, which is right across from the Dutch Royal Palace, was busy with commuters, shoppers, and sightseers. However, things were about to take a disturbing turn. Just before 3:20 p.m., the normal sounds of the bustling district were shattered by screaming and panic. It happened when a man who was armed with several knives began stabbing and slashing people seemingly at random. Witnesses would later describe seeing one man pale and bleeding on the ground, while a young woman had a knife sticking out of her back between her shoulders. The attacks happened on a couple of different streets near the square, but were concentrated mostly on St. Nicholasstraat, or St. Nicholas Street. After wounding several people, the male attacker attempted to flee the scene on foot. Unfortunately for him, a bystander, identified only as a British tourist, saw what was going on and decided he needed to intervene. Surveillance footage captured the Good Samaritan chasing the knifeman down moments before he tackled him to the ground. Further footage shot by witnesses shows the British man restraining the attacker using a belt and sitting with his knees on the suspect's back. He was able to hold him like this until police arrived and placed him under arrest. The chilling incident left 5 people wounded, with at least 2 suffering serious injuries. Local media sources have identified the victims as a 67-year-old woman and 69-year-old man from the US, a 26-year-old Polish man, a 73-year-old Belgian woman, and a 19-year-old Dutch woman. So far, it appears the Polish man is the only person who has been released from the hospital. The attacker has been identified only as a 30-year-old Ukrainian man named Roman D. Reports state that the man was originally from Ukraine's Donetsk region, but that's really all we know so far. It seems police are still working to uncover the man's motive, though they have stated that the crime appears to be totally random. As for the British Good Samaritan, he has been praised by both the Dutch public and officials for his courage and quick thinking. The man was personally thanked by Amsterdam Mayor Femke Halsema and given an award for bravery. Despite this, the mayor said that the man wished to remain anonymous, stating, "He is a very modest British man." She went on to say, quote, "This man made a decision in a split second, which is truly exceptional and for which there should be a lot of appreciation." At the time of this recording, Roman D remains in custody, and police say he is expected to face court this week. Currently, no information about possible charges has yet been released. Representatives from Australia's Queensland Police Service released a massive update in a truly disturbing and long-running investigation this week, announcing that after more than 2 years, they had made an arrest in connection with the alleged murder of a woman whose body was hidden for more than a decade. If you've been a regular viewer of our Crimes of the Week International series for a while now, then you might remember that this story began all the way back at the end of 2022, with a chilling discovery at an apartment complex in the Brisbane suburb of Alderley. It was here on the morning of December 7th that a cleaning crew stumbled across human remains. It happened while the employees were doing some work in the basement storage area of the building. Tucked into a sort of crawl space void behind a cinder block wall was the skeleton of a woman. The remains had been tightly wrapped in plastic, and there were signs of trauma to the bone suggesting the victim had been murdered. Understandably, the condition of the body immediately put police at a disadvantage when they were called in to investigate. However, things got even more alarming when analysis revealed the female victim had been dead for some time, likely years. For these reasons and more, even identifying the victim would be an uphill battle, especially since authorities had little more than vague descriptions to release to the public as part of their request for information. If you'll recall, though, the case got its first major breakthrough several months later in August of 2023, when against all odds, police revealed they now knew who the victim was. Her name was Tanya Lee Glover. She was 38 years old at the time of her death and was living with hearing impairment and vision loss. Shockingly, no one had seen or heard from her since January of 2010. We now know that Tanya's identification happened completely by chance. It occurred after a woman in Sydney named Donna Truscott signed up for an ancestry website. The service used DNA, and as part of the options during sign-up, Donna allowed her genetic profile to be added into GED Match. It turned out Donna's aunt was a distant relative of Tanya's. Tanya's death sadly came as a complete surprise to her family. At the time she died, she had lost touch with her parents. She had moved from New South Wales to Queensland in 2006. When she disappeared in 2010, she was living at an affordable housing unit for people with special needs and disabilities in the Brisbane neighborhood of Fortitude Valley. Sadly, it appears that Tanya fell through the cracks in this system, as no one ever reported her sudden disappearance from the place where she was living. Instead, her personal items and possessions were simply moved out of her room at some point to make space for the next tenant. This is especially concerning and upsetting given the latest information that was released this week. You see, police now allege that not only was Tanya murdered, but that the person responsible was a friend and fellow resident at the Fortitude Valley residence where she was living back in 2010. Very few additional details have been revealed so far about exactly how police made this newest breakthrough after all this time. However, they have identified Tanya's alleged killer as 61-year-old Vanessa Lee Turner. Partial footage of her arrest was released on March 28th, along with news that she had been taken into custody. Exactly how and why Turner supposedly killed Tanya, as well as how her remains came to be hidden in the basement of that apartment complex in Alderley, are just some of the many unanswered questions that still remain. But what we do know is that in addition to murder, Turner is now facing charges of misconduct with a corpse and fraud. The investigation continues. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously. Thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you'd consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much everyone, and take care.